Mekeisha. Welcome back to the 26er podcast. How are you?
I can't complain. Thank you, Delisha. Thanks for having me back.
Yes, this is a fast follow. We keep it all the way real on this show. It's a two-parter, but we're fast, like quickly following up with the second recording, so, which is always good. I hate when they're all spread out. So
no, you got to get it in when you can.
Exactly. So let's get right into it. Before we finished on part one, we talked about your foray into stand-up comedy.
Yeah.
But what I also found incredibly fascinating is you chose to move to Seattle.
I went where the opportunity was at the time. When I graduated from college, my first internship out of college was actually at the San Francisco Chronicle, where I actually had family who I bumped heads with, but that's for another day. But I was staying with a cousin, and I had a base there. But the San Francisco Chronicle got purchased by Hearst the summer I was there. That's just timing, right? Everything's timing. And suddenly I had to figure out, do you stay here and possibly get cut? Because they were saying, we can't guarantee you anything because the agreement you had, the internship agreement, which was supposed to be for like a 2-year stint, was with the previous owners. So Hearst may or may not have honored that. And everybody, my direct supervisors were like, if you have anything else, we will highly recommend for you to take the other thing. So I was like, oh, wow. Okay. And so thankfully that summer I had gone to NABJ is the National Association for Black Journalists. They'd had a conference with the other minority institute or minority journalist groups. So AAJA, Asian American Journalists Association, HNJA, Hispanic National Journalists Association. And so all of them, and the Native American Journalists Association, all of them came together. They have a thing called Unity. I attended Unity, which oddly enough was in Seattle, and met an editor at the Seattle Times who was like, you can come here. And I was like, I don't know. I think I'm still be in San Francisco. And then I wasn't. And then I was like, hey, is that offer still staying? Had never been to Seattle before. Knew nothing about the Pacific Northwest or the sort of, passive aggressiveness of the Pacific Northwest, which is a cultural thing. It's just, I've never seen more passive aggressive people in my life. I've never worn that much fleece or Gore-Tex or been so happy when the sun came out, which was like a holiday, or drink that much coffee. Like all of those things were just like so total cultural shocks to me. Talk about fish out of water, but I made it work. I was there for 4 years. So I was 2 years in Seattle, or a year in Seattle, and 3 years in Tacoma, where I went for a job after I wanted to kind of keep going and kind of stay in an area. I didn't know what was going to happen. But yeah, it worked out. And then that's when I started doing stand-up.
So, it's interesting because people talk about comedians, and many comedians are so funny because they have a lot of internal turmoil. And, they're sort of processing a lot of pain in the way that they do through levity and humor.
Yeah.
So you mentioned sort of building this community while being a comedian. I do wonder, though, being somewhere ripe with passive aggression, with maybe not a lot of people who look like you, and then the weather plays into it as well. Right?
It plays into your mood.
Yeah, all of those things together. Where were you psychologically and emotionally at that time?
Girl, I was struggling. Like I had other interns my age, but not of none of them were Black. There were other minorities, which was nice. I had a woman who was Japanese and Hispanic, who was one of my best friends there. A woman who's Native, another woman who's Asian. So, oddly enough, Seattle just has a large Asian population. I think it's geographical. I'm not sure, or historic. There's some kind of thing. It's probably both. The only thing I knew about Seattle in terms of Black community was like Quincy Jones had lived there.
Exactly. That's literally all I know as well.
And then once I moved there, it was funny. My grandmother's sister, my aunt, was like, "Oh, I lived in Seattle for a spell," and I was like, "Wait, what?" You know how old Black people don't tell you things until they have to tell you things. So
yes.
I was like, "Well, when were you here?" And she was like, "Oh yeah, during the World War II, I worked on Boeing planes in Seattle." I was like, "For the war?" I was like, "What, ma'am?" So she was actually kind of helpful. Like, go to this neighborhood. I think it still exists. If it still go here, this is where I go get my hair products, and it was still there. Like that kind of thing. But yeah, I joined a church. I did a bunch of stuff. I was just trying to find something, some semblance of home and some way to like survive, like you said, the weather and the lack of sunshine and the lack of Black people, like all it was like, ooh. And so comedy really did help me. It helped me stay sane.
So what kinds of stories were you involved in at the time?
Like journalistically? When I first got there, I was doing Pacific Northwest outdoor activities, which is not really my jam. The the editor and I bumped heads, and it was partially my fault. I wasn't completely honest on an assignment that fell through, and I was like still trying to keep it together. And she was like, "Why didn't you tell me?" And she's like, "I don't want to work with that." And I was like, "That's fine." They moved me to a bureau. That was a whole other kettle of fish because the bureau chief was like this sadistic, crazy man. I'd never worked with anybody so abusive, so verbally abusive. Lesser to me, but more. There was literally a woman in the office where he would come in and yell at her and make her cry every day. It was like just the strangest, most dysfunctional, toxic work setting I've never, thankfully, before or after had close, but nothing that bad ever. Just weird stuff. And he was like, it was like the bureau was like a land of misfit toys or something. It was like just like didn't, for whatever reason, didn't work out downtown or whatever happened. And apparently he'd had a history of being, you know, so they put him out there, and I was like, oh, lovely. This is my boss. And you know, I survived all of that just by the grace of God. Thankfully, with stand up and a community I started to build. And you know, it was just crazy. Like before I left, it was funny. This woman came in from the paper I ended up going to work to. She had just left. And she was like, "What's the deal with Lee? Like, you can tell me." And I told her all of it. Like, and this happens, and then every day Diane cries, and she was like, "What?" And then when I went to the paper in Tacoma and blossomed, like just my career took off. Like this is where I first became a TV critic. She was like, "Okay, so y'all couldn't figure out a way to work with her, and you put her out there with Lee." So amazingly, a lot of reform happened, and they eventually fired him after I left, because it just was like, this person, you could say she was the worst or best or whatever impression they had of me, but don't you think it's odd that somehow she went somewhere else and did so well?
Right.
And this same man is making people cry. Like, let's connect some dots here. So it's funny, I'm still Facebook friends with her, and I to this day I thank her for like listening to me, because I think that's the other thing. You know, people don't just walk into a career and blossom, right? There's always this moment where a crossroad, if you will, where you are always like, that could have ruined my life. I could have given up. I could have just been like, I'm just going stand up full time. It didn't pay as well, but I would have been happier. And so it's just interesting. I don't think it's a coincidence. I think all of those things happen to us for a reason, to test you, to figure out, like, is this really what you want to do? Even when you have a crazy man who comes to work every day and like, this, Delisha, I wish I were making this up. He had a little note on his desk that was like, he would chronicle what he was doing that day. He was like, take a poop. I'm going to eat. I'm like, why? And that's why he's gone for all that time when he comes in the, like, why are you coming here and doing this? Like, I just had so many questions. I hope to never see that man again. But these are the things that sort of make us who we are. These are the building blocks that are formed in our careers, in our psyches, in our abilities to decide, like, this is a chance for you to decide, is this really what you want to do? Is this where you want to be? Because there's always that risk you could, unfortunately, or hopefully, I didn't, thankfully, but you could run into another personality like that again. Because newspapers have that, you know, institutions have that.
For sure. But did you feel like, okay, I'm deciding to leave? Like, did you make a definitive decision that this is a toxic environment, or did another opportunity just present itself? And further to that, like, how did you land? Did you decide that you wanted to be a TV critic? How did that happen?
I decided to leave. I started sending out my resume. I was like, they don't know what to do with me. I don't want to be here if they don't want me here. I somehow gotten out of the bureau because they heard the stories, and I got out of there before I left. So probably about a month before I left, I had gotten moved back downtown to the features department, which is where I wanted to be anyway, because I'm more of a features writer. I can do news, and I did some news in Tacoma even. Like, I had to do like a weekend shift for like cops and crime and stuff like that, which is pretty common when you're starting out in newspapers. But I still was like, I don't have to deal with this kind of abuse. I was getting like stomach aches and like rashes and stuff like that. And so I knew I wanted to stay in journalism. So I was just sending my resume to all the papers around there. Like, I live here anyway. It wouldn't be that much of a stretch. And thankfully, my resume landed on the right person's desk they brought me for an interview in Tacoma, and the rest was history. And that's where they made me a TV critic, because the editor-in-chief who who took a liking to me for whatever reason, came and saw me do stand up and was like, she's funny. Like, she has thoughts. And, the TV critic they had at the time didn't seem to, or I don't know, he just didn't really seem interested in. He was more interested in covering pop culture. And at the time, it was like a job, because I guess the person who had the job previously was a pop culture critic and a TV critic. And then they realized quickly, maybe he should just be a pop culture critic and not a TV critic. And they could tell I was way more passionate. So they were like, would you want to be a TV critic? And I was like, that's the thing? Like, you want me to do this? I was like 24 years old. And they were like, yeah. And I was like, okay. So that's how it all started. You just need someone to say, okay, she has a voice. Let's hear. I want to hear what she thinks about this or other things.
And was it like an immediate click where you were like, this is what I was meant to do? Or was it more of that evolution to find your style and voice, similar to what you referenced earlier?
I think it was a combination of the two. Like, I was the weird little kid who had the TV guides highlighted. We're like, oh, this is what we should watch. And here's what, this person was in. Does this actor look familiar? And my parents would crack up like, why do you have that? It's not a Bible.
The good old TV guide that used to be in the little basket shelf at the register at the grocery store.
That's the one. And that was my jam. Like, I would highlight it. It was funny because my husband and I were dating. He was like, did you ever read TV guides when you were little? I was like, oh, did I? I had it highlighted. He was like, you too? So, trust me, there's a shoe for every foot. But yeah, I mean, I was that kid. And so to grow up and to be able to do that for a living, which, was like a dream come true for me that I didn't even know I had. It was just like, of course I should be a television. I love TV. I live and breathe it. This is how I got a picture into the outside world in Detroit and knew about other things other than what I saw around me. I was the kid who woke up in the morning and on Saturday mornings and we watched Soul Train, Nancy Drew, and the Hardy Boys, and then we cleaned the house. And then we went, and had our adventures for the Saturday. But that TV was always a part of my life, and always, sort of instrumental in how I looked at the world. I think it's for a lot of kids, or people who grew up are my age. As kids, that's what you kind of get a sense of the world through the TV. Now kids use the internet and TikTok and, other things. But
so I want to talk a little bit about being a TV critic and the intersection of the role that you play and offering your opinions and constructive criticism about what's out there, and also being a Black woman. And, because we know that while there's more representation for us on television now, and we've made a lot of strides, when a new show comes out with us, it elicits strong reactions one way or the other, right? You have the woke set who's going to just dissect everything and, get into what stereotypes are being perpetuated. You have like the anti-Tyler Perry universe, God. Right? And that always elicits a lot. And it goes on and on. And now we have a lot of conversation around why is all of the content rooted in so much trauma? Like, why can't we just flourish on shows? And there are many different things. When you watch a new sort of Black-centered show for the first time, do you ever feel pressure to elevate it or maybe even criticize it in some way, depending upon the content? Or do you feel like you can give your unvarnished opinion without fear of backlash from your own community?
That's a good question. I think there's it literally is all of the above. I have to be critical because that's the job. So I'm critical to any show with the same amount of criticism, which means I'm looking to see if it is representative of Black people in an authentic fashion. What type of Black people are they hoping to attract? What type of Black people are they hoping to depict? If it's a Black-centered show, how do Black women, fare? Which is, I'll get to why I'm saying that in a minute. And so it's always a challenge. And you're right. No matter what I say, I'm going to get pushback. I already know. I've done this long enough to know how it goes. And I'm not afraid of that. In fact, I expect it. And when I don't get it, I'm always like, really? Because I didn't. Okay, that's cool. Because it's just part of the job. You know what I mean? Like, you're going to get critics who are casual critics who are reading you and going, oh, glad that you say them thinking about that. I'll give you an example. So I wrote about Kevin Hart had a limited series on Netflix recently called True Story.
Yes, I did see it.
Did you like it?
I was actually surprised at his ability to sort of tap into, a dramatic role.
Oh yeah.
As well. So I'll say it kept my attention. I am not anybody who like listens to this show regularly knows I'm a huge documentary buff.
Okay.
Regular, just dramatic television, very limited scope for me. But I've watched more over the course of the pandemic. So I will say I enjoyed it. Like I didn't walk away from it like this is the most amazing thing I've ever seen. But I was definitely, pleasantly surprised. I'll say that.
I was pleasantly surprised as
Yeah.
well. I thought that Kevin Hart and Wesley Snipes had amazing chemistry. I bought them as brothers. I thought both of them brought their A game in acting. I felt like in some ways Wesley Snipes challenged Kevin Hart to be a better actor. I'd never seen him do anything like that. And that kind of deliver that kind of performance in anything. So I was impressed. I was not impressed with how they treated Black women. From the death of the death of the woman who was Black, and they had a character who was not Black say, "Oh, girls like that go missing all the time." Well, unfortunately, that's true. And you're saying this, why? You're saying this like this is a good thing. Who approved that line?
Right.
You thought that was okay to say? Like, you know how many Black women and girls do go missing like that? And they aren't necessarily dancers or groupies at a club. So what does that mean? Like, are we disposable or what? So there's no explanation. It just drops the line and they keep it moving. There were no, you always do the Bechdel test. Like, are there two women talking to each other? There were no two women talking to each other in the whole 6 episodes. Like, how hard?
Literally, I did not think about that until you said it. But
these are the things that I think about as you know what I mean, as a critic. And it's like, it just, to me, and it's crazy because there were 2 directors on the series, and the second director was a Black woman. And when I asked her about it, like, what's up with that? She was like, well, that wasn't good. But I'm a Black woman director, so it doesn't pass the Bechdel test, but it passes the Ava DuVernay test, and that they did bring me as a Black woman on to direct. So I was like, okay, I'll give you that. And so I put that in the story, but I also put, she admitted it didn't pass that snuff test. Nor did any of the women in the show have any relationship independent of Kevin Hart's character. So you either were his writer, the one Black woman who had probably the most evolved character was his writer, or his ex-wife, or his hookup buddy at the hotel, or the woman who all of this drama was around. So it was just like, they don't have an auntie? Like, nobody has an old Black auntie that can just be like, hey, baby, here's some, like, please give me something else besides they have to have sex with Kevin Hart or they have to work for him. And even her relationship with him was strange, because the minute she slept with his bodyguard, he was like, what are you doing? Like, what, you're a dad now? Or like, what do you care? There were too many questions about, like, and so my argument in those instances particularly is that Black women should not have to take a back seat in order for you to tell a story. Somehow, when we tell stories about Black women, there are always Black men involved, because we always are like throwing Black men, like, come on, this Black man is my husband or my brother, or there's always, if there's a Black woman on the show, 9 times out of 10, there's a Black man somewhere in the peripheral, where a periphery, like, he's going to be a part of the story, even if it's not a major part. And I just thought that was kind of cheap for something that was otherwise so good. But when I wrote that story, there were Black women who were like, why can't you just be happy for us? I was like, what? I'm defending you.
I knew the why can't you was coming. I knew when you started the story, I knew the why can't you feedback was coming. And
I thought it was going to come from Black men. No, there were Black women who were like, you just can't leave well enough alone. This is literally my job, ma'am. I'm not messing. I don't know what you mean by that. But my job is to look at a show, and I didn't say the show was bad, but as a Black woman watching it, I felt like they needed to do some more work. I said the same thing about Lupin. I love that. I love seeing, what is his name? It'll come to me. The actor for Lupin and on Netflix. And I love seeing him on the show. Don't get me wrong. His last name is Sai. Why can't I think of the first name? And hey, it's great. I don't know a lot about Black or Africans in France and how they feel and the discrimination and racism they face, which they did touch on, which I thought was great. But you're telling me in all of France, there's not a black woman that Lupin could have hollered at? Like every woman they gave him to talk to, every woman, like from the reporter who was supposed to help him, to his ex-wife, to his ex-boo, who I guess preceded the wife, or they met around the same time. Everybody was white. And I'm like, I know there are black women in France. I have been to Paris. I've seen it. I've seen expats from America in Paris. I've seen African women who live there. Like, absolutely. Why can't you guys just, like, come on. And I wasn't the only one saying it, but again, this time it was white people. You don't know how it is in Paris. I'm like, yes, I do. Leave him alone. Why?
First of all, I love the voice you get when you talk about people responding to what
the voice I hear. That's what I hear when I read these comments, like, you know. And I'm just like, this is hilarious. It's part of the job. Mm-hmm. I can roll with it. I will not roll with it like, this is the same reporter who wrote about X. I'm like, what are you stalking me? So at a certain point, I think we had to turn the comments off. But I just think that it's telling when people get offended by your critique or observation. It doesn't mean a show is not good. It just means no show is perfect. And if you're watching it and you're watching it specifically for Omar Sy, his name, if you're watching it for Omar Sy because he's hot, which he is, mm-hmm. and then you're watching it as a black woman, because of course we do, and he's speaking French and that's hot, then you're like, well, wait a minute. They had one black woman in the show. She was kind of like racially ambiguous black, and she was a cop at the end. And it was just like, this is what you think of us? And the criticism came for the first season, or first, it was, I think, the first half. They broke season 1 down into 2s. Sorry, I have a person making cookies here. Hi. They broke the season down into 2, or season 1 is down into 2. So like the first half of season 1, people were like, that was good. Where are the black ladies? And then season 2 happened, and they were like, still no black women, but they threw, I guess, people like, shut up, look, there's a black woman cop. Like, that was terrible. At least she had like one line.
It feels very much like an afterthought when that happened.
It was very much after. I know it was blatantly clear that it was. They hadn't given it much thought, didn't care until they probably got pushback from Netflix. Like, hey, people are complaining. They're like, oh, okay, well. And then the other thing they did was they had a scene where he's hooking up with this woman who used to be his boo, who I guess preceded his ex-wife or wife. Yeah. And they're riding around in Paris on a motorcycle while Lizzo plays. And I was like, so are you trolling us now?
Well, like that is the thing now, right? Like interjecting black music into shows that are not necessarily black, right? It's always supposed to, like, I guess,
pat you on the head, make you feel good.
I don't know if it's that, or it's supposed to like signal empowerment or just swag. I don't know, but I've noticed that it's all about our music sort of sprinkled in, whether we're reflected in the cast or not.
I know. And so the argument, I think, from the mainstream or the broader audience, which is not us, is, well, you got a black man on the show. Okay. So you can't have 2 black people at the same time. Like, what? I don't understand what you don't understand about my problem with this. Mm-hmm. And it's fine if you don't. Every black woman when I put it up was like, oh, thank you. I thought it was just me. Or I looked at Twitter and they were like, are they serious with this little song? And the song was like, because I love you. Like, so are you telling me I should be crying because I'm watching this as a black woman? Like, what is the message here? Like, did you think about the song that you got? It was just, there were just too many questions. There were too many questions.
Have you touched on the colorism piece in your writing as well?
Oh,
right?
Yes.
Because oftentimes, like, when we do get a black woman who's represented, it's a very specific kind of black woman.
Which is not a coincidence.
And so touching on that, what has the feedback been? Because I find that when women raise it, and when women raise it who don't look like that, right? Who don't have this really fair-skinned privilege, then it's like you just hate it. Like, you're just bitter because it's not you, right? And so what has your experience been commenting on the colorism piece when black women are represented?
Well, it's just funny, Alicia, because I'll give you an example from something recently that I wrote. Like, Grownish was, because Kenya Barris has a terrible reputation for representing women beyond the color of Tracee Ellis Ross.
Yes.
If you're darker than Tracee Ellis Ross, you may not be on the show unless you're Ruby or Marseille, or Ruby who plays the grandma, Jennifer Lewis who plays Ruby, or Marseille Martin who plays Diane. They're the brownest people on the show. You ain't getting darker than them. And if they throw you a bonus hole in there, it's like it's a one-off, right? Same thing happened with Grownish. So because they had gotten criticism, it was hilarious because they even had in the season, I think first season, there was a storyline about like the Doug character, played by Diggy Simmons, only dating women of a certain hue or dating women who are not black at all, like, you know, exotic women or whatever. Not white, not black. Or some whites. I think he had actually dated a couple white girls they showed. But it was interesting because one of the criticisms that came after this episode, people were like, should Hallie and Chloe be talking about this? They're not the brownest crayons in the box. Like, is this supposed to? She's the same color as Zoe. I think Zoe's brown. Like, people were clowning them. Like, nice try. But what you did really was just bring more emphasis and a brighter spotlight on your problem with people's problem with the show. Where are dark-skinned women? So, right. So then season 3, they tried to placate people, or not maybe placate. I'll be fair. They tried to address it by bringing 2 dark-skinned women on the show. Yeah, Aaron's girlfriend be dark-skinned, and they had Luca's girlfriend be dark-skinned. So then people were like, so let me get this straight. 2 people who used to date Zoe decided to go all the way black, like Africa black. Like, okay, that's fine. That's fine. I don't know what you're trying to tell us with this. Well, nobody else could just be on the show and be black and be a dark-skinned black woman, but fine. They got to date Zoe's exes. So what happens? They don't, neither one of them stays. Zoe steals Aaron from the one dark-skinned girl, and the other dark-skinned girl goes off with the Sky character to Japan to cover her in the Olympics. It's like, well, that was nice while it lasted. I mean, on one hand, you're like, at least it happened. But on the other hand, you're like, so you were never, this is probably going to be the last season because it's season 4 and there are only 4 years of college.
Right.
So you're just never going to have another dark-skinned woman on the show. Ever? It's just so weird. And I can't really tell you, honestly, I've been thinking about it. Like, is it better to have happened at all? Or is it better that they would have just stayed in their ignorance?
So since you brought that question up, right, I want to talk about it in the context of a non-black show. And Just Like That. I do not know if you watched And Just Like That.
I couldn't finish it. What's the thing? I was like, what is the point?
Right. So, but I'm sure you've seen enough to know and probably heard enough about it, of like this onslaught of diversity and just cramming a bunch of issues in. Right.
Cramming is the
literally cramming. Right. It was so many different things they were trying to address.
It was so much
that it just felt forced. So on the one hand, I'm watching this and thinking like, I actually really love these minority characters. Right. Like just who they were on the show. And also great to see people get work and all of that other stuff. But it just felt very much like A, the kitchen sink, and then and B, they also were in service to these white
Isn't that interesting?
Which drove me absolutely insane. It was like they couldn't just stand on their own. Everything was about how they served, these 3 women. So my feeling, right, is like Sex in the City worked. It worked how it was, right? And of course, there would have been new criticism and different kind of criticism in 2021 into 22 had they not had any diversity. That would not have flown in the way that it did back then.
It got away with years ago.
Yes. Yeah. But to your point, I started to ask myself, is it better to just leave it alone sometimes as opposed to just trying to throw in something to make it feel like you've addressed the issue? What are your thoughts on that?
I think that there's a way to do it that they haven't figured out yet. I think that there's a better way. I don't know necessarily. I don't know all, but I know there's a better way than what they did. Because then you're like, now you're being stupid. Like now it almost felt insulting.
Yes.
To literally have Nicole Ari Parker come on and then they call her Black Charlotte. I'm like, maybe she's white, whatever the character's name is, because that's how little I knew about the character. Like, why she gotta be Black Charlotte? Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, there were so many moments where I just couldn't get past it. I just couldn't keep watching. And I might go back later, but
yeah, it was very, very cringeworthy. And I think for me, the
Che character,
yes, all of it was
you have
just
this like super butch, angry Latino lesbian. Like, damn, like this is a lot. And
it was
then
a lot. It was a whole lot. And for me, I think the moment
Miranda was just like, I like the ladies now, like, which is again the actress. Were they trying to address the actress's sexuality and her change in life because she was married to a man and then she divorced him and married a woman? That's cool, but I'm guessing in her real life she didn't run away with a butch lesbian Latina woman from a podcast. I mean, it was like,
yeah, it was very much
so
like
heavy-handed.
They went into a writer's room and said, "Here's the hot button issues and diversity's bingo card." And like, how do we get as many things as we can on the card into the show? That's really what it felt like.
That's what it was.
And oftentimes, you know, maybe that's why I don't watch a lot of TV, but oftentimes I just feel like there are not a lot of things that resonate with me, right? It's either like the stars sort of power universe, right? Or the reality TV.
That's a different conversation.
Yeah. And then there's, you know, mainstream TV where they're trying to sort of cram it in, that you got to search, you know, for the shows that you feel like, oh, this speaks to me and it feels balanced and it's being done in the right way. Do you think with such a focus, right, to talk about, you know, racial reckoning, as you mentioned on part one, like, do you think with so much focus on diversity that we will see the tide continue to change, in that there will be more critical thought around how Black people are represented on screen?
I hope so. I don't have a lot of, I don't want to be cynical about it because I have done this for a long time. And so it's kind of hard not to be sometimes.
Yeah.
And then you'll see glimmers of hope in a show that you don't expect to see. I'll give you a perfect example. You mentioned the Power universe, and the best one to me so far has been sequel wise. Power, it is what it was. It was what it was. But Power Book 3, when they brought Patina Miller in to be Kanan's mom, you're talking about a Tony Award winning actress who killed every scene she was in. Like, there was no scene that like lived after she walked out of the frame. And that gives me hope. Because even in the thing that you think, no offense, is probably just going to be straight up gutter, gully, ghetto, like, oh, here we go, 50 Cent's crazy musings. I had to give it to him. He brought it by bringing Patina on. And he said he wanted her. He'd seen her on Broadway and wanted her to be on his show. That's progress. Not everything, but she's a strong Black woman in a role I would never have expected to see, or on a show I never would have expected to have seen that kind of portrayal on. And found myself actually liking the show. I was just like pleasantly surprised. Like, this is legit good. Like, good actors. Unlike Ghost Book 2 or whatever it is.
I have never seen an episode of Power. So let me just put that as like full disclosure. Anything in the Power like sort of world, I know. I know so much about it. Like, I know Patina Miller is on Power because of the internet and social media and all the conversations and the hilarious tweets that you read, right?
You feel comfortable saying this in person? Because I mean, on record, because people gonna come for you.
Oh yeah,
they're gonna get you now.
Oh, absolutely. And every time I'm out to brunch or dinner, and people are like, you know, what are we watching on TV now? I'm like, yeah, I haven't really seen anything new. Every time somebody says, you haven't watched Power yet, and I like defiantly say no. Like, no, I haven't seen it.
Oh, so now you're doing it to prove a point. Okay, I see you, sis. I ain't mad at you. You gotta put, you know what? Find that heel and die on it. I'm not mad at you.
Yeah, it's just, you know, it has not drawn me in. And I'm not, it very well could. I could press play and be like, this is ridiculous, but I'm gonna keep watching it. Because we all have those things that are kind of ridiculous that you get sucked into. But to date, I'm like, I don't even have the bandwidth to now start this and get caught up. So I'm just on the hill. It's not even like for any like moral reasons or like convictions. At this point, I don't have time to binge.
Do you? You don't have anything to prove.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, I am not in the dark about the show just because it spawns so much traffic, right, on the internet, that I know so much and I've never seen an episode. That's what's just hilarious, right? But you know, the Patina Miller piece, I have heard that, I've read about it. That she's
amazing.
Really, you know, she's really
dark skinned, and I interviewed her about that. I was like, you know, that's not normal. Like even in that universe, there's Tasha, who's Ghost's wife. just pretend. Let's not like pretend like you know what I'm talking about. But they Ghost had a dark skinned wife, and they had a Latino
Yes.
or Latina mistress, and people were like,
and see, I know this, right? Because again, it's just so it spawns so much chatter online. So I feel like I've seen it, even though I haven't.
that's hilarious. But you know, the thing is, the colorism piece affects black women more.
Mm-hmm.
It's not that it doesn't exist for black men. It's funny because I had to watch BMF, and well, I'm from Detroit. I had to watch it anyway, so I watched it for work anyway too. And it was interesting because the colorism aspect came into that because they were like the 80s belonged to light skinned dudes. Like if you weren't the barge adjacent, you weren't getting hollered at. And like people like Wesley Snipes and Michael Jordan sort of changed the game, and they're like, oh wow, black men can be dark and attractive. Like it was like a revelation, which is weird to me because I'm like, with Sidney Poitier, but that was not the 80s, so I don't know. But it's just to hear a black man who created it, Randy Huggins, who's hilarious, talk about how that he wanted to make sure that he put that in the show was actually, again, inspiring to me because it shows that there are people who are thinking about this and saying, I'm telling the true story. But even in that space, they had light skin. Well, the one brother had light skin privilege, and both of the brothers were like lighter skinned. And you know, when it came to even sort of oddly enough, how the police may have profiled them, right? They looked more, for lack of a better description, Huxtable-esque, or you know, of a certain hue, and then they weren't always suspect. Versus that if they were darker skinned and had done those same things, even in a city like Detroit, they may not have gotten, you know, as far as they did because colorism exists amongst our people.
Absolutely.
That is a real thing. And like to your point, if you say, okay, well, we have black people in this cast, but they all look a certain way and they all pass a paper bag test, that is disturbing. It is infuriating. You know, my daughter watched Babysitter's Club, and they brought a black girl on there, and she was like, that's the black girl? Why is the black girl almost the same color as the other girl that was biracial? Like, they just did not really make. They probably thought they were like patting themselves in the back, like, oh, look at this, they got two black girls. Yeah, two black girls that are like light. So is that a coincidence? Like, we're supposed to believe there were no dark-skinned qualified young black girl actresses? It's just frustrating. And even she, thankfully, at this point is articulate enough to say, I don't like this. I'm not watching this because you don't care about if you don't want to represent anybody who looks like me, or you want to exclude people who look like me, then I don't want to watch. And I applaud her for that, you know, at 11 years old, being able to see that and deciding that. I wasn't thinking that way when I was little. When we were little, it was just great to see black people. You didn't even think about they were light-skinned and dark. You're like, just black people, there's so few of us. Let's just watch everything.
Yeah, like I don't ever remember questioning why Sandra and Denise look nothing like their siblings on The Cosby Show. Like, we just accepted it for what it was. Like, you don't look like your parents or your siblings, but this family works, right? And
I mean, I come from a family with all shades of black people, so I get it, but not that extreme.
Yeah, that was just like,
okay. Clearly we're from a different show.
Right, exactly. But back then it was like,
you're like, fine. You're like, Denise is cool, her clothes are great. Like, right. Think about like, whose child is this?
Exactly. So, but shifting gears a little bit, I want to talk about how the landscape of media has changed, journalism has changed, the onslaught of all these various forms of commentary, right? Be it podcasting, vlogs, people calling themselves social commentators who built entire YouTube followings just on talking about what's going on in the world. But in that, you see, what I see is like an illegitimate news source saying that they have a source and they're dropping breaking news that is oftentimes wholly inaccurate, right?
I know.
Or I just finished Andre Leon Talley's memoir, and he talks about years of being on the red carpet at the Met Gala, interviewing the celebs as they come in, and he's got decades of experience in this business, so he understands fashion a different way, having worked at Vogue and other outlets, and how he was just summarily and unceremoniously replaced with influencers who had 20 million followers but knew nothing about the industry. And so thinking about that and some of the things I've seen as of late on the internet with respect to like these bloggers thinking they know
Girl.
something, right? And thinking that they are legitimate news source, competing with that, right?
Because you are competing with that.
You are, right? What has prompted you to stay in the business despite the way that it has evolved, particularly in the last decade?
Girl, when I moved to LA in 2007, so we've been here for 15 years. Is that 15 years? Yeah, 16, 15 years. And I remember I covered, I think it was basically when I got here, because it was before I had kids, or we had kids, I covered everything, girl. I was at the MTV Music Awards. I was at like the SAG Awards, Grammys, Oscars, whatever. You name it. If there was something, it was a carpet, I typically was there. And I remember going to two different MTV Music, or one was I think MTV Movie Awards, one was MTV Music, I want to say. And the music one was the one, oddly enough, where Beyonce announced her pregnancy by like rubbing her belly, and then they show like Jay-Z and they had Kanye like yay, like it was bizarre, but back then it was like whoa. So I'm on the carpet for that, and across from me, because the carpets are crowded. That's the one thing from the pandemic I do not miss. I'm like, that was actually good that we don't have to deal with that anymore. It's probably going to come back, but I hate how crowded carpets are. And it's also the hierarchy of the carpet is so insulting that you have TV always comes first. TV is king. And then you have the photography pool, so all the photographers from every outlet that has a photographer, from Associated Press to Reuters, everybody who has a photographer, they're in that pool. And then everything after that is like either radio or print. And print is usually dead last and relegated to the side. And don't even get me started, because you've probably seen some of this, where when it's a Black publication, they ghettoize you and segregate you to the end of the carpet, which 9 times out of 10, talent won't even stop, won't even go the whole way. They go to a certain extent and then they leave. So a lot of times with Black outlets, particularly the smaller ones, because there's a hierarchy amongst the Black outlets too. For instance, at Essence, I always had a better space than say, Black Tree or whatever, YouTube networks or whatever, you know what I'm saying? Or Blavity or whatever, all of that stuff would be shoved to the end, or Gossip, dead end, dead ass, just at the end. And then Essence would be like maybe 4 or 5 slots before. And then Essence got better and better in terms of its positioning, because when we would align ourselves with, at the time, no longer the we, but when I was with Essence, they would put it with like Entertainment Weekly, because they were all part of the same Time Warner family. So I would get better positioning on, say, an Emmy carpet, because I was near a spot right near EW, because they were sister publications or People or something like that. And so you would see how bad it would get, because like literally across from me when I was on the MTV Music Awards carpets was the guy some chubby white dude who would put on a leotard and sang a video for single ladies. And I'm like, that was my last MTV Awards show. I am not going to put up with this. I'm not going to stand across from the guy who put a leotard on for YouTube. I had to suffer through internships, abusive, sadistic editors, and Seattle and Tacoma and back to Detroit, then been to LA, because I did go back home to Detroit News, and then come back. I did the LA thing, all of those things, to stand here and share space with the single ladies fat leotard guy. Like, this is not, we're not doing this. This is insulting. If I need anybody, because the beauty of a carpet is that you get access to everybody, right? You get people you would normally never get. But I got to a point where I was like, I just won't have access to certain people. I just will not stand here and be insulted. And his space was technically better than mine. Like, you're like, he didn't go to J school. I mean, at least I don't think so. I had never seen him journalistically anywhere else. He literally was a fat guy in a leotard, and they were like, that's funny. And he had, I think he was covering it for like Nicole Bitchie or something. And I was like, that's a great gimmick, but what is he going to ask?
Right.
And that's what is the most frustrating thing about it. I'll never forget. I was at, I think we called The Best, man, it was something, that Kevin Hart movie with Josh Gad. The name of the movie escapes me. It's not a good movie, so it's not a big deal. But I went to the set to interview Kevin Hart. And this woman who was there, who was a journalist, brought her friend. And we're interviewing Kevin Hart in a circle. So he would literally go, you ask questions. He gets to this woman and her friend. The woman asks her a question. The friend decides to ask, "How tall are you?" And everybody's like, me, I'm horrified because he hadn't gotten to me yet. So he could have just left. I thought he was. I thought he was just going to leave. And he goes, "What?" And she's like, "I mean, I'm this tall. Let's hug." Like, gets up. And everybody's just like, "What is happening? Like, who are you? Who brought you here? How did they let you in?" This is what I mean. Like, and so everything could have gone south. Thankfully, he was like, "Okay, well, we got that out of the way." Then he goes back to the rest of the questions. And by the time he got to me, I asked if he considered himself the new Richard Pryor and Josh Gad, like Gene Wilder, and he lit up. He gave me the longest and best answer of everyone's, and everybody was like, "Oh, thank God you brought it back to center." But I didn't do it for that reason. I legitimately had that question in my pocket, waiting to ask, until your girl got up and almost blew it up for everybody with her, "How tall are you?" Like, and I was like, what is, I went to J school for this, son. Like, this woman is just walking off the street with these random height, like, what is, and these are the moments you have to just rise above. You have to say, I know what my mission is. I know what my job is. I still do feel responsible for, you mentioned Tyler Perry. I've interviewed now the whole cast of Sisters. That was not a show that was my jam. It was not intended to be my jam. What I do know, it is the #1 show in Black households. There is no way in the world I'm not going to cover that. And when I interview the stars from that show, even if I'm not a Tyler Perry fan, which I can't really say that I am, I respect the hustle and I like the actors. I appreciate them as working actors in Atlanta doing this thing, and like Tyler Perry pumping his money into the economy. It doesn't matter what I like about the show or don't like about the show. What matters is people watch the show, and these actors are so happy to talk because no mainstream media has bothered to talk to them. That is what I see. That is when I go, okay, even in this predominantly white workspace, I get it. I understand why I need to talk to you and why you're so happy and eager to talk to me as an actor on his shows, because people don't take them seriously.
Right.
People, just like I went to J school, they went to acting school. A lot of them are like theater people. A lot of them are theater nerds and people who went to, like, who some of them went to the Juilliard. I mean, like, these are legit actors. Doesn't matter if you like Tyler Perry. It means these people are working. So respect the hustle and give them a shot. Talk to them. A lot of them have really good things to say.
And I feel like I have this conversation a lot. People will say, "Can you believe they're on that show?" Or, "This is ridiculous. The plot is terrible, this, that, and the third." And I'm always saying the same thing. You realize some of these people went to like Yale School of Drama or Juilliard, or, are really well trained. And my response is always like, have you ever done a job that you don't necessarily love because you have bills? Like, I think sometimes we forget that this is work for them too.
It's work.
So it's, if you can be on a highly successful show, it may not be what your dream was for your career, right? You may have wanted to do classical theater or Broadway or really serious dramatic roles, but you are working in your chosen field. And I think sometimes we have an inability to like accept the fact that just like we need a W-2 or like a 1099, so do these folks. And they may end up auditioning and getting on a show that is not their life's work, but it is really successful and is keeping them working. And you have to respect that, whether you like the content or not. It doesn't take away my criticisms about often how we are portrayed. I'm not saying that,
right.
But I'm not knocking anybody's like ability to pay their bills consistently.
Every actress, I think with the exception of maybe two, or actor and actress, or just say actors, most of the people on the cast of Sisters were like, I was $2 away from overdraft. I was doing community theater. I was struggling and, sharing an apartment with 6 people. And then Tyler Perry gave me a shot. How can I be mad at that? Listen, is the dialogue terrible? Yes. Does Tyler Perry need to hire some writers? Yes. Does he need a writer's room? Yes. And even people who like the show will tell you, yes, all of those things. But that doesn't take away from the fact that the actors, despite not having the best dialogue or things to say, bring it every week. And he doesn't play. Like when his production schedule comes up, you can tell because they have them in the same outfit. They're shooting like multiple episodes in 24 hours. Because that's how he works those people.
Well, he
But
writes like entire seasons in a weekend,
in a
which
bathroom or somewhere,
yeah, I
like
mean, I
I
have
don't know
my
where.
own views about that, his writer's room or lack thereof. But yes, he is about churning out content, and I
He
remember
churns it out, and just like people like Meg Ryan started on a soap opera.
Mhm.
Don't knock the hustle because everybody has to start somewhere.
Right.
People just don't become, I'm just walking into this Oscar. Like, no, everybody there started somewhere. And maybe it wasn't Tyler Perry back then, but it is now. And work is work. That doesn't mean those people are going to never, ever work anywhere else again or get opportunities on larger shows with better writers' rooms. It means that they had to start where they are, make the most of the scene that they have, and then get exposure and people see them and go, hey, I want to put that person in my movie or I want to put that person on my show. And that's what happens. I mean, Lance Gross, ask him, ask China McClain. Those people were people who Tyler Perry helped establish their careers and they went on to bigger and better things. It happens. It can happen. So,
Absolutely.
yeah, that's my
So,
soapbox for that.
so shifting gears a bit, we've talked a ton about your professional career, but you have referenced your husband. We've also established that this is a hustle, like journalism,
Yeah.
and you know, it's there are many people who have like the main gig, but there are also journalists I know who like are writing for all these different publications and putting it together as
I've been
well.
there.
So being a wife and a mom, how have you managed to balance that and nurturing your home and nurturing and sustaining this career as well?
It's a juggling act. Sometimes I drop the ball and I'm not proud of it. I just feel like that should go without saying. And you're not gonna always get it right, but I try. I try my best to get it right. I rely on food delivery services when I have to recap Tyler Perry show, or I try to like last night cook ahead for the week. You know, like I cooked up some ground turkey, so my husband kind of likes tacos. My son loves tacos. My daughter will eat something else probably. But if I can get 2 out of 3 to eat tacos on Taco Tuesday, but my schedule is set. So these are the things I have to think about constantly. Hopefully, as things clear up and Omicron is less of a threat, we can have the cleaners come back because I am tired of cleaning toilets. Mm-hmm. Trying to get my son and daughter up on that too, and my husband too. We've all been chipping in and doing a lot more stuff than we wanted to do because we typically, if it weren't a pandemic, would have hired this out.
Right.
But you know what I mean? You make it work. Or if I watch a screener, I try to watch it with my husband, like make it sort of an event. Like we were burning through those Insecure screeners, okay? And he gave me, it was great because he gave me a story idea. He was like, what's such and such? And I was like, oh my God, you're right. And when I went to the press event for Insecure, I asked a question. It turned out to be a great story. So these are the things that I like about the job, is sort of making it a family affair. Mm-hmm. Whenever I can, and my husband watches football for a living. So, we watch games together. I'm a long-suffering Lions fan, trying to keep the tribute. Oh, girl. Trying to keep the tribute, the tradition going in honor of my dad, a tribute to my dad, who was a long-suffering Lions fan. And it was hard to see Matthew Stafford win the Super Bowl for the Rams, but that's life. That's fine. But yeah, I mean, this is what we do, right? And I feel like our kids know that. And if they see us in front of our computer, 9 times out of 10, they're on their own devices anyway, but they get it too. They understand it. Like even now, my daughter walking by, like she's talking to somebody else again. She gave me a hard time, but she gets it. This is what mommy does. So mm-hmm. I think that, and my son and husband are at the park right now. He's like, fine, we'll go to the park. It's just what you have to do. And what I like about it though is that they want to write. My daughter is like the strongest writer and reader in her class. We didn't work on math, but math was a weakness for us too. So when I see that, it is a point of pride for me because my love of reading came from my mom, an English teacher, who also is a good writer. And so those are types of things that you go, is it genetic or is it environmental? I don't know, but I know that my son is already loves to tell stories and ask questions and stuff like that. It's just sort of like it's in when it's all around you and it's sort of in your blood, mm-hmm. It's kind of hard for you not to want to at least try to do some version of it.
Right.
Or at least have that in your arsenal. I mean, I know as an attorney, I know you're a good writer because most attorneys I know who are good are good writers. You have to write really good briefs. And that matters. Like all those skill sets, no matter what you decide to become, will never fail you.
Absolutely. And yes, I cringe at poor writing. Quite a bit. Oh my God. Yeah, we can talk about that offline. But before we let you get out of here shortly, describe a time when you had to be extraordinary on an ordinary day.
You know, you got me with that question, right? This morning I was like, brushing my teeth, like, what should I tell her about the fact that I had 2 kids? Was automatically is extraordinary. Like, you're just like that. That was insane. My daughter was born on the hottest day in the history of Los Angeles. My son, my water broke. I didn't even know my water had broken, and then we had a second child. My husband had to rush to the hospital to join me. It was supposed to be a scheduled C, ended up just being an impromptu C-section. And oddly enough, was at a meeting for some of his coworkers. Unfortunately, where some of his coworkers were informed they were getting laid off because Verizon had just purchased Yahoo Sports or Yahoo. So this is the kind of stuff, you know what I mean? Like, you're like, that was extraordinary. But I wanted to give you a professional example outside of those two, the birth of both of our hilariously beautiful kids. And say when I moved to Los Angeles, my very first day here, I was covering the Emmy Awards. It was the first Emmy Awards I'd ever covered. I literally flew here the morning of the Emmys, got off the plane, threw on a dress, had no idea where I was going, and drove to the Emmy Awards and covered it. And I would have to say that pretty much sums up my experience in Los Angeles. Like, the baptism by fire, and knowing after years of covering the Emmy Awards from the newsroom in Detroit and from watching a television to suddenly being thrust into the actual show and being behind stage. It was one of those moments where you're like, I was born to do this. I mean, this is the craziest scenario possible. And thankfully I never had to do that again, but I was born to be in that seat. I was born to be there. I was born to ask those questions and write a story on a deadline and go to a city and a place and a dress that never had been in and never had driven on a freeway here. Like, it was insane. And I still did it. So that definitely was, I have to say, that was the most extraordinary thing I've ever done on an ordinary day.
That's good. Now, this question, I have 2 sort of interview questions. First of which might be a bit cliche, but I'm going to ask it anyway. Dream interview that you haven't gotten yet.
Oh man, you know what I regret never having talked to Toni Morrison. I really wish I could have talked to her before she passed away. So now I've already interviewed Oprah a couple of times. I'm actually interviewing Sam Jackson tomorrow. I've interviewed him once before, and I adore him. I've interviewed Denzel, Lupita, Halle. Who's left that I want to talk to? I've interviewed Angela Bassett, who I also admire and like a lot. Issa Rae. There's got to be someone.
It could be Tony, who's not here anymore.
Obama or Michelle. Either Michelle or Barack. I've never interviewed them because I don't cover politics. I have no.
They are moving. They've moved into the entertainment space.
You see what I'm saying?
It's very possible that it could happen.
That's who I would love to interview. One or both of them. You're right. That I think I would die.
That Netflix deal. We're just gonna put it out there. It's gonna happen for you. I'm gonna speak it if you don't. It's going to happen.
Thank you for that. Yes, I'm gonna speak it to. I'm going to interview Michelle and Barack Obama. That would be a dream come true. I would love that.
Okay, so second and final question about interviewing. Someone you have interviewed who was a beautiful surprise. Meaning they gave a more exceptional interview than you might have anticipated.
I would have to probably say Samuel L. Jackson, who just, the minute I walked in, I had the book American Gods on me because I was trying to finish it while I was watching the series at the time. And he goes, "Where are you in the book?" And he wanted to talk about the book. Like, that was game changing for me. Like, just how warm and kind and down to earth. I just was like pleasantly surprised. And it was funny because it was one of those things where he was doing Hitman's Bodyguard at the time. And they were like, "Do you want to interview Selma Hayek and Sam together?" And I was like, "I write for Essence. They don't really care about Selma, no offense." And they were like, "Oh, okay. We'll get you Sam for 10 minutes. So they throw me in this room. And instead of it being 10, he talked to me for about half an hour because we were having a blast. And I was like floored. I couldn't believe it. I couldn't believe he was so nice. I couldn't believe he wanted to talk to me that long. And I couldn't believe we were like nerding out over books. He's just one of the coolest people I think I've ever talked to. Denzel is not always as nice, but I did have later on a good interview with him. One of the meanest interviews I've ever had was Aretha Franklin, who was mean to me not once, but twice.
That doesn't surprise me at all. Having read, the biography on her, the stories that you've heard. I mean, I think we could talk probably 45 minutes just about Aretha because listen, when I read that biography, I was like, what a broken individual underneath it all. Like so much talent, but if you know her backstory and really painfully insecure in a lot of ways.
I don't think liked women.
Not at all.
Like literally, I was there with a photographer. This is when I was at the Detroit News, and I had just moved back, and she was one of my heroes. And I was like, "Oh, Miss Franklin, I'm so excited to meet you." I was all nerdy, and she was like, so I put my hand out, like, "Nice to meet you," and she was like, "I'm eating," and like started shoving this corn dog, like a chili dog, in her face, and I was like, so I like walk away. And then the photographer who was with me, who was a black man, she was like, "Oh, is that you, boys?" Ha ha ha! Wipes her hands, hugs him. I'm just like, okay, you know what? Okay.
Having read the book, like that actually, that doesn't surprise me at all.
It broke my heart.
Now knowing so much more of her story, I felt sympathy actually.
I do too.
We've sort of laughed at all like the shade that she threw, all these compilations that have come out and everything else. But I think, she had been through so much and losing her own.
She slapped me in the face with her weave. Like, just like.
Not slapped you in the face though.
Yes, like so they were like, okay, she lip synced at the Pistons. It was the Pistons were in the NBA Finals, and at the game she lip synced. So they go ask Aretha if she lip sync. I was like, please don't make me do this. They were like, go ask her. So I go work up the courage, I tap her body.
You asked the Queen of Soul if she lip sync?
This is what they wanted me to do. This is the cruelty they put me through. So I tap her bodyguard. I'm like, I have one question. Can I just ask her one question? He's like, okay. He was nice. She was pissed. I was like, Miss Franklin, my editor wanted to know, did he mistakenly think you were lip syncing, didn't even get all the way in my mouth. She was like, and like slapped me in the face with her weave and like walked away. And I was like, that's okay. That's fine. I'm going to just put that in the story. When asked if she lip synced, she slapped the reporter with her hair. I put hair. It was her hair. She bought it, whatever. But it was just like, okay, that's fine. It's fine. I was just doing my job.
I feel like there are many women who have similar stories about their interactions with the late, great Miss Franklin.
She wasn't feeling a lot of women. She liked Mariah Carey and Jennifer Hudson. That's it. You weren't Mariah Carey and Jennifer Hudson. God bless your soul. She didn't like Whitney. I think she liked Lauryn Hill. I got the impression she liked Lauryn Hill.
Well, I won't delay the interview with that. But anyway, I read some things where I was like, well, maybe she did it.
Oh, no. Oh, God, in the book?
It might have been in the book, actually, or an article. I can't remember. But like, I had read some response she had to what Lauren had said about being in the studio with her. And it was meant to be complimentary. And, the way that Aretha took it when someone asked her about it, she's like, okay, why would she say that? I don't know what that means. And I don't remember the exact quote, so I won't butcher it by saying what I think it was.
Oh my God.
Yeah. But, she was just like, okay, I don't know why she said that. And, when you read what Lauren said, you knew that what she meant it in a very positive, like affirming way. Aretha, like it just fell flat when someone asked her about it. So it might be limited to Mariah and Jennifer. It might have to, honestly. I
think so. I think it's all you get.
So looking ahead, what would you want out of the next phase of your career?
Oh, good question.
Besides the Obamas.
Right. I want to take on a long form project. I think I know I have it in me. When I've done bigger things that I had to kind of get my arms around, it felt good to do that. It's sort of a challenge, a challenge you set for yourself, but also sort of like, you know, journalistically, you want to grow as a storyteller and be able to tell us. I would love to do like if not in podcast form, you know, in long form writing, just to tell a story of a woman in particular I want to tell a story about, who died on an electric chair in the 50s in Ohio. First Black woman to be electrocuted in America. And I'm obsessed with her story. I would love to tell her story. I've been had some starts and stops. And my job right now is so demanding that I haven't had unfortunately, the chance to either probably podcast for myself, which I have a podcast, believe it or not. I haven't worked on for a year almost, unfortunately. A little more than a year. And then this passion project of mine that I really want to tell this woman's story. So it's coming. I know I have a date in mind that I want to get it done by. So that's the challenge I'm setting for myself. If I can get the time, I'm going to make the time to go to the next step and tell her story, because I think it's a story that desperately needs to be told.
So when you get the Obamas, you must reach back out and say that I called it. I will take credit for that when it happens, for putting it out there.
I love it.
And I look forward to this long form project. You know, I firmly believe, and we believe on this show, that when you set an intention, no matter how long it takes, if you move in that intention, it will come to fruition and it will come to full completion. So
thank you for saying that.
I believe that it will happen for you. And I have thoroughly enjoyed both parts of this conversation. And
I had more fun today because I had to be like, okay, I gotta go. I can just talk, so thank you for that.
Yes, we know how to make it work under all kinds of circumstances. You have no idea. So tell the people where they can find you online.
You can find me at tvline.com. I'm on Twitter at Mekeisha Madto, MEKEISHAMADTO. And Instagram, same handle. Yeah, so all those places. If you want to get a wider breadth or look at what I've done over the years, there are a couple sites. If you just Google my name, like muckrack.com has my entire is there, which is awesome and scary. But everything I wrote for Shondaland, Essence, The Wrap, Variety, ESPNW, all the publications pretty much that I've written for you can find under that at muckrack.com, and just type my name in.
Awesome. Well, this has been great. It definitely felt like talking to a girlfriend, which is always good.
Yay!
And,
we're gonna be fast friends.
Yes, and I love the tidbits about the behind the scenes interviews, because I know how nuts some of these people can be. So that was great.
Thank you. Yes, I will. One day you have to bring me on, and I'll just tell you horror stories. Like the time I interviewed Shaka Khan and she was high, or the time that Ozzie Davis made me cry, or because he was being mean to me.
Ozzie.
He was mean to me. He was, but this handler was like, he didn't take his nap. I'm so sorry. And I was like, I would have called him when he napped. I would have waited for the nap. Or Leslie Tyson was one of the nicest people I've ever met in my life. So, you know, Oprah was really fun. So yeah, good and bad, right? You take the good and the bad, and that's that. And you just make a career.
Yeah. So there's a whole other podcast episode angle here with this untold stories of entertainment journalism, for sure.
Girl, the stories he could tell.
But we're going to let you get back to mothering and being a wife. To our listeners, you know what to do. If you've enjoyed this episode, like, share, comment, subscribe, tell 3 or 4 people about it. Go look up Mekeisha's work. We know, like, the work of journalism is not easy. There's an added layer of difficulty for Black journalists, and those clicks are important. That engagement is important. So go read what she is writing. I know I'm definitely going to do that. And as always, if you don't do anything else, remember to be extraordinary on an ordinary day. Take care.